What's up guys, Saf here on SuperSaf TV. Welcome to the SuperSaf style camera comparison of the iPhone 16 Pro Max versus the brand new Samsung Galaxy S25 Ultra. As always, we'll be looking at all aspects of the cameras. There will be chapters down below. Let's get to it. Now, as always, we're going to start off with photos from the primary cameras. And after taking hundreds of images from both cameras, they both take excellent photos as expected. I'm going to sound like a broken record here, but you'll generally find that the Samsung has more contrasty images. This is something you may or may not prefer. You can achieve a similar look with photographic styles on the iPhone. You can adjust this after the fact too. Now, Samsung does have some new filters and some adjustments that you can make, but it saves images as JPEGs, so things are baked in. You don't have as much information as the iPhone has with HEIF. Now, the iPhone does shoot by default at 24 megapixels. The Samsung shoots at 12 megapixels by default. So if you're going 100%, by default, you will get more detail on images from the iPhone. But of course, the Samsung has a higher resolution camera, 200 megapixels. And we have two stages, 50 and 200 megapixels. At 50 megapixels, if we compare it to the 48 megapixels on the iPhone, you can see that the Samsung is sharper thanks to that high resolution camera, and you can shoot at all the way up to 200 megapixels, and this is going to give you that much more detail. Now for low light, things were very close with the primary cameras. The Samsung a bit more on the yellow side here, and also when it did come to bright lights with contrast of dark shadows in the background, then it did tend to overexpose, whereas the iPhone was much more balanced. Now in this example, which is extreme low light, we can even see the stars. The iPhone just has a much cleaner image compared to the Samsung, which is quite noisy. But when we shoot indoors in low light, then the iPhone with that noise reduction is also applying that to this Teddy, or maybe because it's just an Android. But if you look at the Samsung, it's maintained the textures of this Android plush a lot better compared to the iPhone. So pretty close for the primary cameras. Now let's look at the ultra wide cameras. Now both again, great ultra wide cameras. The Samsung once again with that extra contrast. Now in this example, I think it's a bit too much, whereas the iPhone might seem a bit too flat to many. Once again, you can use those photographic styles. This shot is very similar for both images. In this example, I do prefer the dynamic range overall on the Samsung. If you look at the shadow areas, those have been maintained better on Samsung. But when we go to the maximum resolution for both devices, then you do lose some dynamic range on the Samsung. Here you can see in the background, the highlights have been blown out. Both devices do shoot great macro shots, as you can see, but with the iPhone, you can focus in closer, which is an advantage. Now, ultra-wide camera in low light. This is something that I mentioned in my previous camera comparison as well. The iPhone does seem to be very soft. If we go in 100% to this image, you can see that details are much sharper on me on the Samsung compared to the iPhone. And once again, in this image as well, the Samsung just much sharper and a much more pleasing image compared to the iPhone. Now let's test out the zoom. So both devices do have 2x zoom, which crops into the middle part of the main sensor, and results are quite similar. But when you get to 3x zoom, then the dedicated optical 3x zoom camera of the Samsung kicks in. And as you can see from this example, it does give you sharper results. And this is going to carry on all the way up to around 4.9 times, because the Samsung is using the 3x camera going up to 4.9 times. The iPhone is using the 1x zoom camera and going all the way up to 4.9 times. When we hit 5x zoom, then both of the optical zoom cameras kick in and both provide very good sharp results. But when we extend the zoom, so if we go to 10 times, for example, you'll notice that Samsung's processing starts kicking in and it gives you much sharper results. This is especially noticeable when you get to around 25 times, which is the maximum on the iPhone. And yes, there is some artificial sharpening happening on the Samsung, but I kind of like it. On the Samsung, you can go up to 100 times, and I mean, that is totally not real. Like, this is some serious processing happening. But nevertheless, when it comes to extended zoom on the Samsung, you do have an advantage. Now, to quickly remind you, if you're enjoying this video so far, do consider subscribing and hit that bell icon. These camera comparisons take forever to do. Me and the team have been working forever. I've lost count of the hours and the amount of sleep that we've missed. But if you do like these camera comparisons and you want to see more, then do consider subscribing. Now, what about low light zoom? Well, at 3 times, once again, that optical zoom quality of the Samsung is gonna beat that digital zoom on the iPhone. But when we get to 5 times, things start getting interesting. We have the 5 times optical zoom cameras on both devices, but the iPhone has a brighter image with less artifacts. If we go to 10 times, there is a difference in focal length. I don't know, they call them both 10 times, but they've got slightly different focal lengths. You can see this a little bit more clearly, especially if you look at the branches behind me. They've all become a bit of a blur on the Samsung, whereas the iPhone is maintaining that better. Going up to 25 times, once again, there's a lot of processing happening on my face on the Samsung, whereas we do have a cleaner image on the iPhone. So although that processing might be beneficial in... Oh my God, how many times do I have to say that? So although that processing goes in Samsung's favor when we are using extended zoom in good light, this is not the case for extended zoom in low light. Now, what about portraits? Both of these take excellent portraits. Look at the edge detection here. They've both picked up the area between my arms, and we've got a very complicated background, but this doesn't seem to be an issue for either of these. Now, the next step that we can go to in portraits is 2x, and both of these seem to be doing really well. The Samsung has a brighter image with brighter shadows, but the blacks have been better maintained on the iPhone. Now remember, the Samsung does have that dedicated 3 times optical zoom camera. And when we use this versus the digital zoom on the iPhone, at 3 times zoom, we do get more pleasing portraits on the Samsung. They're sharper with more detail compared to the iPhone. But my favorite focal length for portraits on smartphones now is 5 times. And here, once again, look at how good both of these are in terms of edge detection. The Samsung has boosted the shadows, which is making me look a little bit more gray, but that's fine. I think both are still doing really good. And I absolutely love this shot. I think this is such a good example of how well both of these are doing. It's raining so much, but just look at the edge detection on both of these. They've even picked up that little flap on my umbrella. Now, looking at the shots, I do prefer the Samsung overall. It's a sharper image and it looks cleaner compared to the iPhone. So excellent portraits from both devices, but the Samsung does get the advantage with that 3 times optical zoom. Right, now for selfies, I think both take excellent selfies. You do get a wider field of view with the iPhone, although I do prefer the colors generally on the Samsung. You can see the black on my jumper has been maintained better, and the iPhone does tend to go for a bit of a bluey look. I found you can see my skin tones are much better on the Samsung here. Although the iPhone does have better dynamic range, it's maintained those highlights in the background compared to the Samsung. Now, for selfie portraits, I think both do excellent. They've got great edge detection. And for low light selfies, if you do take a selfie with the night mode, it's very difficult to keep your hand still. As you can see in this example, the iPhone is doing better. The Samsung is giving a bit of a blurry mess. Using the front-facing selfie flash on both devices, I prefer the Samsung here compared to the iPhone. Now, before we talk about video, we need to talk about some of the new AI features. So we've got cleanup on the iPhone, which will let you remove objects and things from your images. And then we've got generative edit on the Samsung. Now, comparing these side by side, the iPhone is way quicker and does not need an internet connection, but the Samsung produces much better results. You can see here that the Samsung has filled in the tree nicely, whereas that's kind of been cut off on the iPhone. And although this does take a little bit more time, I would prefer that and have a better result. The Samsung also has sketch to image, which is a really nice feature. You can add things like a cat to your image very quickly and easily just by doodling on it. This is something that you don't have available on the iPhone. Right, now let's take a look at video. Usually this is an easy win for the iPhone, but Samsung has actually done a great job this year. At 4K 30 frames a second in good light, things are very, very close. It was very difficult to pick a winner between these two. And the Samsung now has 10-bit HDR, which is switched on by default. And it also has a very easy way to export that HDR video to SDR video, so it's viewable on all devices. Now, of course, because this video is exported in SDR, I've had to get those HDR videos and then export them in SDR. And both do really, really well. Once again, it's so difficult to pick a winner between these two. Now, for low light video, again, things are very, very close. I would say that the iPhone is better in extreme low light, but the Samsung has 8K video. Now, not only from the primary camera, but also from the ultra-wide as well as the 5x telephoto camera. And looking at this example, check out how much more detail that you get on the Samsung with 8K video, especially if you crop in. And because of the new 50 megapixel ultra-wide camera on the Samsung, you can also film at 8K with the ultra-wide camera. Once again, lots of detail. It's not as wide as the iPhone, but you do have the advantage of 8K. However, when we go to low light with the ultra-wide camera, then the Samsung was very jittery. Check this out. When I was walking, it was just all over the place, which I didn't like. So for low light, I definitely prefer the iPhone. Now for the zoom cameras, at 5x zoom in good light, both do really well. But when we get to low light, then the S25 Ultra has less noise. And this is something that you can see very clearly in this example. Now for the front-facing camera, 4K, even with HDR, was very, very close. However, the iPhone is wider, and when it came to cinematic video or portrait video from the selfie cameras, then you had much better dynamic range on the iPhone. And speaking of cinematic video, as you saw from the start of this video, the iPhone is still king of cinematic video. It's sharper, has better overall edges, and if you do pause the video at any point and zoom in, and especially if you look at my beard, the iPhone is way sharper compared to the Samsung. This is something that we also had on the S24 Ultra. You can also edit the amount of blur and the point of focus on the iPhone after the fact. You can't do this on the S25 Ultra. Now for stabilization, things were pretty tricky. They were both similar at 4K, I would say. But when I tried to use action mode versus super steady, the default is the ultra-wide camera, and the Samsung, for some reason, just lost focus. I tried this twice, and I looked at the camera first when it had me in focus. As soon as I turned around, it lost focus for some reason. So I'm not sure why this is. And for that reason, I would give the stabilization win to the iPhone. Now, both devices can shoot in log video, so you can go in and grade after the fact. Both of these seem to do really well. But the S25 Ultra also has a Pro Photo and Pro Video mode where you can adjust things like your ISO and white balance. With the iPhone, you will need a third-party app to be able to do this. On the Samsung, this is built in. Now for slow motion, I think both are actually very good. Both can do 4K 120 frames a second. And watching me jumping like a lunatic a few times, things are very similar. The Samsung can do 4K 120 FPS with the ultra-wide camera. This is something that you can't do on the iPhone, but on the iPhone, you can do 4K 120 FPS at 2x. Now, both of these perform best with the primary cameras, if I'm honest. Now, for the audio, you had a listen at the start of this video, but we have some new AI features on both devices. We've got audio mix on the iPhone, which gives you some different formats: in-frame, studio, cinematic. The Samsung has AI Audio Razor, which in my testing is very, very good. So have a listen to this comparison in a very noisy environment. All right, now let's try out the audio mix feature and the audio razor. There's a lot of noise in the background. There's some cars going. Let's see how much of that we made on the iPhone 16 Pro Max and Samsung Galaxy S25 Ultra. I'm literally just talking, so we've got something to base this on. Absolutely unnecessary, but hey. Let's have a look. Now, I tried the different modes of audio mix on the iPhone, and that was the best that I could get. With the Samsung, just by tapping auto, you can get some amazing results. Yes, both of them do sound slightly artificial, but I would say that the sound is much better on the Samsung compared to the iPhone. So that is the SuperSaf style camera comparison between the iPhone 16 Pro Max and the Samsung Galaxy S25 Ultra. I mean, to conclude, you can't go wrong with either of these. Both have some of the best cameras out there. The iPhone has those photographic styles, gives you lots of control after the fact, and in certain aspects in video, it still outperforms everything else, such as cinematic video. The S25 Ultra has that dedicated 3x zoom camera, which is going to give you better portraits at that focal length. It also performs better in extended zoom when you are in good light, and it has better AI image editing features, as we saw. So based on all of that, which one of these would be your pick? Drop me a comment below, let me know. If you're thinking of picking up either of these devices, I'll leave some of my affiliate links down in the description below for the best deals that you'll be able to find out there. And I'm currently working on a detailed comparison of the Samsung Galaxy S25 Ultra and the iPhone 16 Pro Max. If you want to see that first, you know what to do. Subscribe and hit that bell icon. I hope you enjoyed this video and found it useful. If you did, then do smash that like button for me. Thanks for watching. This is Saf on SuperSaf TV, and I'll see you next time. Man, it is so late.